What is up, everyone? Been a minute since I've sat down and talked. Today, I just want to get straight to the point. I wanted to talk about the new release or new announcement for the Nikon ZR. And though, I'm still a nobody on YouTube, I don't have Nikon sending me stuff. I have been a Red owner for a long time. I do have this bad boy right here, the Red Raven. And, back in the day, this was that was the introductory camera, and I bought it new. I paid a good penny for it, and I've loved it. I always thought it was gonna be my running gun, which, if you know Red, it is definitely not a running gun. It's anything but. But needless to say, 4.5K, 16-bit RAW. It doesn't have some of the IPP2 functions that the new codecs have built in, but pretty much everything about this camera just speaks Red, speaks cinematography, and even for their intro camera, after 6 years of owning it, I still love it. I still use it a lot. Still makes great footage. And so that kind of led me to thinking, like, maybe I should talk about the Nikon ZR, and kind of like, as somebody who's shooting on a Sony FX3 right now, mainly because, I thought the Sony was great for YouTube, a lot of good cinema stuff. But let's just be real. Sony doesn't shoot RAW. They shoot H.265 or something like that, I think. And, there really isn't a camera out there right now that's shooting RAW. And so for Nikon to come in, and if you keep up with the news, you knew Nikon bought Red a while ago. They already put the Z mounts onto the Komodos, and you figured it would only be a matter of time before they try to put it in one of their cameras. And as somebody who loved Nikon, I went to school. I shot with Nikon all through school. I still, to this day, have two D750s sitting here that I use every so often. I don't use them as much because I've kind of moved on to, like, say, Fujifilm for my photography and, other cinema cameras. The reason I have two D750s is because when I first got into cinema work, I thought that this would be a good option. And little did I know that it wasn't a good option, that Nikon just really wasn't good at doing video work. And so having them announce this, they've had the Z6, the Z9s, they have some stuff that have been able to do film. But with them adding the Red RAW, Red codec, even at 12-bit to this introductory camera that's only $2,200, is pretty game-changing. Canon just announced their C50, still kind of a high price point, and Fujifilm did their full frame camera, which I just think is ridiculously priced. Obviously good stuff, but really, in digital cinema world, outside of ARRI, I just don't think that anything compares to Red. I think Red and ARRI are like the gold standard, and Nikon bringing it into more of a consumer space, I think, is good for everyone. I think it's, you should have the best quality stuff. Sony does really good quality, but I'll just be honest. Shooting on S-Log3 with a codec is not the same as shooting on RAW, where I could go in, I can change the ISO, I have more dynamic range, I have more recovery of highlights, I have more way to shape the video. The main thing about the reason I moved to Sony, and the main reason that I have enjoyed the Sony, is that it is a running gun. I can get up and shooting. Autofocus is nice for shooting YouTube stuff. It basically does all my my vlogs, my talking heads, all that stuff. So, but let's just be honest. Yes, you can get cinematic looking stuff out of Sony. Just go look all over Instagram. I'm not saying you can't. You can really do stuff. But for me as a Red user, even someone who uses an Ursa, who has Blackmagic RAW, shooting with RAW is just different. You just have way more control over everything. You can even Red over Ursa. You just even have more control over everything. Everything's a streamlined pipeline. You know what you're going to get every time. You can get it in the ISO range you want. Obviously with my Red, it doesn't have high ISO like the Sony does, which, Sony's high ISO is amazing. The new Nikon ZR has 6400, I want to say, as the upper second ISO. And so those things are cool, and it'll be very interesting to see how the RAW works for the ZR with those ISOs. But I just kind of wanted to talk and thought that, as someone who has a Red, someone who loved Nikon and geared away from Nikon for the longest time, just because of their capabilities to film, I thought that this was a really good first introduction for them into the actual cinema space. I think it's a very budget friendly. I was looking at some of the specs. It does do 12-bit, 6K up to 60 frames a second. I mean, that's nice. It's still not a Red Raven. I mean, I could do 120 frames a second on there. Yes, granted, it's only 4.5K, but you know what? I've never had a problem shooting with that. The Komodos are slightly higher, but then you have to rig them out. So you're probably looking at $2,000 or $3,000 more dollars if you have nothing in the Red ecosystem. Where at least with the Nikon, it's ready to go. It is only 1 pound, and so I'm kind of curious about how the Red coat is gonna do long term. As far as overheating and stuff, I just don't know if it's going to be a good option for like long talking heads or 20-minute video clips, all that stuff. I mean, you won't really know till more testing is done, but I just think that getting RAW into a full frame camera that's that small is a very cool accomplishment by Nikon, and they work closely with the old owners of Red to really get this dialed in. And I think, there's all sorts of opinions on the internet right now, right? It's not a Sony killer. It is a Sony killer. I think for someone who had an FX30 and also has an FX3, I think that would be easily a Sony FX30 killer. I think, if you're looking to get into the space and you only have a certain amount of money and you want like the best quality footage, getting that Red RAW. And if you have the full capabilities that you have in what I have in the Raven, even though it's only 12-bit versus 16, I think that, it would pair very well, right? Like that's one thing as filmmakers, like you always want to try to do is have your cameras be similar, right? So then you can edit it and do what you need to do. And so, having a Raven as an A cam and a ZR as a B cam would be really good, or, a Komodo as an A cam and a ZR as a B cam. So I think it opens up a lot of opportunities for either people who are just looking to get in the space or people who have Red already and they don't want to drop another 10 grand on a second camera. I mean, though you can get a lot of aftermarket cameras for cheap now. A lot of them have hours on it. So if you're looking for something new that's got most of the technology, I mean, there's a ton of features on the ZR that they've announced. Some 32-bit floating audio is what I read. Also, there's also other codecs, but I think really the game changer that they did is obviously the Red RAW, and so. I think if you are someone looking to get into the cinema space, I think at $2,200, I mean, obviously a lens, but if you have lenses and you're just switching ecosystems, just get some adapters. But I think it's like $2,800 if you want to get a 50 millimeter autofocus lens. And so I think that, like I said, I think Nikon did a really good thing. I think it'll bring down prices. Hopefully it'll bring down the Red prices as well. I'm sure the Komodo ergonomics will probably go away because, if you also know Red, that the Komodo was originally a crash camera. With the Komodo X, I mean, it has a lot of features in there. And then Nikon and Red also did another thing. They also released the Raptor VE. And so I don't know all the specs on that. I didn't even look it up. It's still, a higher price range. You're looking at 15,000 plus, specking it out. And, I heard it doesn't have a lot of the frame rates and stuff. So I didn't really want to go into too much of that. But what I was kind of getting at is Nikon obviously is hitting the market. They did do a new Raptor VE as what I want to think it is. And then this Nikon ZR. And I think, it's just very interesting and intriguing that the Nikon has such a cool entry point and a price point that I think a lot of people can afford. And I do think, like, for me personally, I'm going to wait until it comes out, but I think I might actually, I don't want to say want to replace the Sony FX3 because I can use it elsewhere with the podcast studio and other things or whatnot. But, Spring took over the Canon R5. I got the Sony FX3, but I'm definitely interested in the ZR once it comes out, and to see how I can add to my arsenal, especially for on film or my actual paid shoots, because having two RAWs with the Raven and then going in and if I need to get quick shots, quick B-roll shots, all that stuff with the ZR, it makes it for a nice consistent workflow. And that's what I found sometimes kind of harder when I'm grading stuff, is when I'm going out in the field, I'm shooting the FX3 and the Red. It's slightly different. I mean, yes, I can get things the way I want it, but it takes more time. And when you're doing stuff for money, the less time it takes, the more money you make, the more return of investment you get. And, and I think that's a huge thing when you're talking about this stuff is that 2,200, especially if you're getting paid for it or you're doing YouTube or whatever, is it easy to set up? Is it easy to get going? Will it give you the quality you need to make your client happy? Will it get you paid? Will you see that return of investment? And as much as I'm a gearhead and I do sometimes just buy stuff because I'm drawn to it, I've always tried to ask myself, especially on my bigger cinema purchases and stuff, is will I get the return of investment on it? Why it's still usable? And 6 years later, I'm still using my Red. I've definitely got my return of investment on it. We're getting ready to hopefully do a couple more campaigns here soon that we've been working through to get priced out. And, so, I've made my money on these investments, and that's kind of the thing that you have to ask yourself, especially if you're a filmmaker working on actual paid shoots or you're working with clients. So yeah, I mean, I don't really know what I can add spec wise. There's all sorts of videos out there on all the specs. There's a lot of people who've already got their hands on it who could show you the quality of it. But I kind of want to just talk as somebody who's used a Red for a long time, what I personally thought about this new announcement, and that I think if you are serious about getting into cinema or even switching to the Red ecosystem and you're looking for a really base entry point, this is going to be a good one. I think that Red has some of the best images out there besides ARRI, and I think that it's Red, ARRI, Blackmagic. And, and Blackmagic has been really killing it over the last few years with their entry point stuff, their 6K, their Pixis, all that stuff, I think plays a real huge part in what Nikon is doing now, because I feel like now with some of these Nikon bodied cameras, they're competing basically head to head more with a Blackmagic than I would say with a Sony FX3, or, it's kind of a dual thing because, the Pocket Cinema, the Pixis, all those have been very good priced. And, the thing about the Ursas is you also get DaVinci Resolve Studio for free, which in of itself is like a $500 value. And then on top of that, usually most of the stuff outside of batteries comes with Blackmagic stuff. You don't really have to get an extra monitor or extra, all these other extra things that you do, as say when I had to come up with the Red, and even back then with the Ravens, like you only could get their card, right? So I think what Nikon's doing is great. I'm excited to see this release and what else they're coming up with, not just on the Nikon line, but also on the future Red lines, because like I said, I just think Red is a big player in the cinema world, and so I'm sure there's going to be some more stuff coming up soon. And so yeah, all right, I appreciate everyone who's watched the videos. We'll talk to you guys soon. I got a couple other cool videos coming up, and we will chat shortly. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video.